Welcome back to the Rustic Wife. I'm Alana. So as you can see over my shoulder here, the garden is in full swing and there's lots that's going to be ready to harvest shortly. Lots of green beans and tomatoes. So with that comes canning. The canning season comes on all at once, it seems, and there's just a flurry of activity in the kitchen and the garden. So I thought I'd do a video today and talk about things that I'm going to can again and things that I probably won't. A couple of fails I've had and some successes. So I think I'll take you inside and show you some of the things that I will and will not can again. I'm downstairs here where my canning shelves are, and you can see there's some spaces, so it's getting ready to be filled up again. So what I'm going to do is, because it's a little bit loud down here, I'm going to bring up some jars upstairs and sit at the table and you can see them better and probably hear me a little bit better. Alright guys, I just went down and gathered all the things from my canning shelves to bring upstairs and show you the things that I do and I don't like. So we're going to start with the likes. I've got probably about an even amount of things that I like versus the things that I probably won't can again, or maybe I'll change some things and do it again properly. But the things that I do like and always can and always will are jams and jellies. They're pretty straightforward, easy to water bath, and it's cheaper than buying them at the store, and you can control the sugar if you're using a pectin like Pomona Universal Pectin, and I'll leave a link to that down below because you can use honey or no sugar at all for doing those. Also, you can adjust the sugar in a box of commercial pectin like Certo or Bernardin or Sure Gel. You just have to boil it a little bit longer. And again, I'll leave a link to my wild grape jelly and how I actually boil that a little bit longer and use less sugar. So again, the things I like are jams and jellies, and if you mess up and they don't set, you can always take them out of the jars and reset them, boil them down a little bit longer until they have gelled. So that's definitely one thing, jams and jelly. This is strawberry and this is wild grape. I have more like orange marmalade downstairs and some raspberry from last year, so I'm just getting going doing the jams for this year. Another one for water bath canning that I do love is Relish. I'm always going to can that. This is just when the cucumbers are going crazy and maybe some of the cucumbers are too big for you to pickle. Relish is always a good option and it's really simple. So Relish is another one. So this one is a sweet hot dog relish. I also do a dill relish, which is excellent too. And this is always good to mix into salmon salad or sometimes potato salad to give it that little bit of a tang. So Relish, that is one that I do love. And on the topic of cucumbers, dill pickles, I have canned these for years. Sometimes my recipes have been a little too salty, according to one of my friends I used to work with. But I think I've got the recipe down pat, and I'll leave a link to that below. But yes, I will always can dill pickles, and I use the picklers. Now, in the past, when I have used just regular cucumbers and cut them into rings or into spears, they've always been mushy, and I don't like that texture. So using the pickler cucumbers when they're fresh really makes a difference, and they stay crunchy. And yeah, so dill pickles, and that's a hot water bath canning method for that too. You can see that I've used whole small cucumbers in those, and they're nice and crunchy and good and not too salty. And my friend at work, you know who you are. So some more pickling recipes that I always make is 9-day pickles, and they always stay crunchy due to the process and how you make them. 9 days you need to take, hence the 9-day pickle recipe name, but these are delicious. They're a sweet pickle. I also use the pickling cucumbers for these. I think you can use the bigger cucumbers cut into smaller pieces and they'll still be crunchy, but I just prefer to use pickling cucumbers, and you can see that they're small there too. But these are sweet pickles, and they are, if you've ever gone to a church function like a wedding or funeral even, and they have those little church sandwiches and sweet pickles, these are them. And that is the hot water bath method I use for these as well. You don't need to pressure can these. So another recipe that I will always can for in the pickle department, hot water bath canning method, is bread and butter pickles. This recipe I use, it was my husband's grandmother's recipe from a book, a church book, I think, from 1949. So I've been doing this recipe for years. Now, I do have a jar of these in the I won't can department that I'm going to show you in a minute, but this recipe here using small cucumbers is key because, again, they can go mushy if you're using the bigger ones. Another thing that I am going to can again is peach salsa. I wasn't too sure if I would love the sweet savory combination, and I do. Excellent on tacos and nacho chips, everything that you would use salsa for. It's also really good. I've mixed it in with a chicken dish. I've also used it on top of fish, so it's really good. So I'll be doing that again. So that's peach salsa and hot water bath canning. Another thing that I love to can is fruit. So this one is sour cherries. I did not make this into a pie filling. I just canned the cherries in their own juice. If you're using fresh cherries, you can just use a light syrup to do it, or I think you can just use water and then it'll just be like the cherries in their own juice. So I like to can them like this because I can make a pie filling if I want, or I can just thicken this juice and put it over top of ice cream, or just take the cherries out and eat them like that, or put them into yogurt. So canned cherries, I buy them in a pail each year around this time in July. The cherries are ready in Niagara, which is south of us, and I usually get a bucket of cherries in their own juice, no sugar, and then I'll just can them like that. And those are really nice in the winter, so I'll do those again. And that is a hot water bath method for that too. Another fruit I love to can is peaches. Again, when they're in season, I get baskets of them and can peaches. These are a total savior in the winter. I love them just like this, straight out of the jar. Another fruit that I love to can, I have for years and I will continue, is peaches. They are such a savior in the middle of the winter when imported fruit tastes like cardboard. I love these just straight out of the jar. I love them on ice cream. They're really good in fruit crisps and pies. So I love these. Now, the trick is to get the freestone versus the clingstone peaches. The freestone come a little bit later versus the clingstone, and the clingstone is where the peach will actually cling to the stone. It's kind of hard to pry the fruit off of the stone sometimes, and it'll kind of make a little bit of a mess. I have canned them, and they are over in my I probably won't can again section. But the freestone, you can just cut the peach in half and then pop the pit out, and it makes a nice clean cut for your canned peaches, you can see. And I always do these in a very, very light syrup. You don't even need to do a syrup. You can just do water. And this is hot water bath canning again. And another one that we absolutely love. Canned tomatoes, another one that I've done for years and I will continue doing. They're really good for soup bases, excellent for, well, anything. Make your own sauce in the middle of the winter. My husband just looked at me in the window. I always hate doing this when he's watching because it looks like I'm talking to myself. But I would normally do these with paste tomatoes. I didn't have any last year. So, well, I had a few, but not a lot. You can see how seedy they are when you use the bigger tomato. So I will always do the canned tomatoes, but preferably with a paste tomato. And another one that we absolutely love is tomato juice. I will use any kind of tomato for this, and because I just use my food mill. Actually, I'll show you what that looks like if you're not familiar with the food mill. This is an old-fashioned food mill, and what I do is I put the tomatoes without peeling them into this, use this paddle and kind of push the tomato pulp through here, and it leaves all the seeds and the skin inside that cone. So that is so handy. I got that from an auction for 50 cents. And I've been using it forever. So I use this to make my tomato juice. So it doesn't really matter what kind of tomato I use because, like I'd mentioned, the seeds and the skin are going to be in that cone. I can just put them in the compost when I scoop them out. So tomato juice I will always make, and this is using the hot water bath canning method as well. I also add a few vegetables in there and a little bit of citric acid just to make sure it's safe to can with the hot water bath canning method. So that's a great one. So pressure canning, beans, I don't have any of the green beans left. We just have 2 jars of yellow from last year, and these are excellent. We go through so many of these. My husband loves them. They're a really nice texture. They don't go mushy, and we love them. So that is definitely one that we're always going to can, and that is the pressure canning because it's a low acid vegetable, so it needs to be pressure canned. Another one I tried for the first time this year is mushrooms, and I am so happy with how they turned out. I got a whole bunch of mushrooms on sale, and I mean, mushrooms don't last that long and they're not wonderful to freeze. They kind of go a little bit mushy, but I pressure canned these, and next time I see mushrooms on sale, I'm going to grab them and pressure can a bunch because they turned out really nice. Not mushy because I'm a texture person. They were excellent on pizza, really good in soup. Excellent. So I will pressure can these, and again, they need to be pressure canned because it's a low acid vegetable. So another one that I love. Another one that we love, especially my daughter, dilly green beans. The only thing you have to watch out for is just be mindful of the salt. I find that they can teeter on too salty sometimes. So we will can these again. We have for years, but just be mindful of the salt. And don't use iodized salt when you do your pickles. It can make the brine cloudy, and it can maybe make your vegetable that you're pickling mushy. So make sure you use pickling salt or a sea salt or a pink Himalayan salt, something that doesn't have chemicals and stabilizing additives into it. So these are great. So now I'm on to the things that I either won't can again, or I'll change the ingredients that I used or the method. So the first one is salsa. I've been canning salsa for years. I usually use a paste tomato, which has less liquid in it, so the salsa is thicker. Now I didn't have a lot of paste tomatoes last year, and I used just regular juicy tomatoes, and you can see how watery it is. I mean, the taste is fine, but I would have had to boil that down for a long time to get rid of some of that liquid, and then the fresh taste kind of goes out of it. So yeah, really watery. So I will can salsa again. I won't use really juicy tomatoes, and I'll be using the paste tomatoes, providing ours turn out nicely. So that is a hot water bath method as well. And these tomatoes I had mentioned just previously in the things that I will can again, and this is just an example of the ingredients that I won't use to can tomatoes, and it is really big juicy tomatoes. They're really quite anemic and seedy. They just don't look nice. There's too much juice, less tomato, so I will try to use the smaller tomatoes and paste tomatoes, or the ones that aren't so big and juicy. So I will can tomatoes again. I just will pay more attention to the product that I use. Now again, last year I didn't have the paste tomatoes, and I did have quite a few large ones that were juicy, so that's the reason why. Now one that I probably I will can again, but not a lot of, is jalapeno peppers. These are quite mushy. I don't like that texture. I think that they've just gone mushy because I've had them on the shelf. I did so many of them, and we didn't eat them all, so maybe I'll just can a few and eat those, and then just be happy with those instead of trying to save them. I will can them again, but just maybe not as many. I mean, even though they're sealed, I just find that they do kind of go mushy after a while. And this is a jar of bread and butter pickles. Now it's a good one, but I don't have one. I threw away the ones that went really mushy when I used the bigger cucumbers, but you can actually see I did use some bigger cucumbers right there. And you can see it just basically fell apart. So that's what happens when you use bigger cucumbers and maybe you didn't cut them thick enough. Not very nice to have a mushy, mealy pickle with your sandwich. So again, I will can these again, but I would just make sure I only use the pickling cucumbers or some firm, smaller ones because mushy. Another one that I'm kind of iffy about canning is pears. You have to be so careful and make sure that they aren't too soft because then they'll just be like a mealy mush in your mouth. And they can't be too hard because they don't really soften. So they have to be really optimal. I mean, unless you love like a hard pear or mealy pears. But for me, again, I'm a texture person. So I would only can pears providing they are the perfect ripeness. I've got a bunch of these downstairs that are a little bit, I canned them a little bit too hard. I thought that they would soften up a bit. They didn't really. So I've actually been using these in a Korean barbecue sauce. It calls for an Asian pear. I don't have Asian pears, so I've just been using these. So I am using them, but I just have to make sure when I'm canning them, I have the right ripeness of the fruit. And speaking of fruit, as I mentioned before, I will can peaches, but I will just always try to get the right ripeness and the right fruit that I need for canning. Now this one here, although they taste good and they look pretty good, these were done with a clingstone peach, which again is when the peach, the flesh actually clings to the stone and it's hard to get the fruit, like the delicate fruit, off of the stone. You can actually just see, you can see right there, it's just kind of stringy. The fruit is a little bit softer. They kind of break down a little bit. You can see right there. They kind of break down a little bit too as they sit on the shelf. So again, best to have the proper fruit for what you're canning. There's the differences. I mean, they both look good. They both taste good. Just this has a little bit better texture than this one. So this is applesauce. Now, I will can applesauce because I love it, but this method that I used, I will not do again. I used some apples and I steam juiced them with using my steam juice evaporator, and I got most of the juice out for juice concentrate, and then I was left with applesauce mush. Well, I canned that thinking, oh, it's gonna be nice and thick, great applesauce. It's okay, but it's more like paste. So obviously I took the juice out of it, so I knew it would be pasty, but I just did not like the texture. So the next time I'm probably just going to make a fruit leather out of the pulp left over when I use the steam juicer. To tell you the truth, I probably won't use the steam juicer for the apple juice. I prefer a pressed apple juice versus the steam juice extractor. And if you don't know what a steam juice extractor is, I will leave a link above to a tutorial I did on what one is and how to use it. So, but again, I'm probably just going to use the cider press this year for apples versus that. And this just turned out like paste. Now it's okay to use for baking. It was fine, but I didn't love it for fresh eating. A little bit too pasty. So one that I probably won't do again, well, if I do, I'll just do a small batch, is pressure canned corn. I did not love the texture. I did not love the flavor, and I don't like the color even. It's kind of dark up the top. You can see the liquid in there, but there's really not much that I liked about this. It was okay in soup and stews. Actually, it tasted pretty good. If I do pressure can them again this year, it's just going to be enough just to toss in soup and stew if I need it. I just don't like canned corn. I like it frozen, and that's my favorite. Everybody else likes it like that too. Another one that I will not pressure can again, not even for small batches, is pressure canned beets. I will do and have done for years pickled beets, which we love, and I will always do those. But pressure canned beets, again, a little anemic, and the flavor was horrible. I love a beet. Some people don't like the flavor of a beet, like an earthy flavor. But as a guy that I used to work with, he always said they taste like basement. And that's what I find the pressure canned beets tasted like to me. Some people love them, but just not for me. So I won't do those again. And another pressure canning method. This is the first year that I have pressure canned beans. Like I did some pinto beans and some chickpeas. I did the long soak method, and then I think I soaked them overnight, and then it said, the instructions said to cook them for I think 30 minutes or 35 minutes and then pressure can them. I have seen a lot of people do them with no soak, or I've seen them do them with maybe boiling them for a couple minutes. Jill Winger from Prairie Homestead did a video on doing them for just boiling them for 2 minutes and then pressure canning them. Now, I don't know if that goes by the safety regulations, but a lot of people do it that way. I don't know. But I don't like the texture of the soak overnight and boil for 35 minutes and then pressure canning. They're quite mushy, but on a good note, these were good to make hummus. They were excellent to make hummus, so I probably will do the chickpeas like this again, and then some with the short boil. I'm gonna do both this year. Excellent for hummus again, but not nice to have in a salad or even in chili really, because it's just too mushy. And the same with the pinto beans, very mushy, not nice in chili. Would be okay for refried beans though, so that method's great, but I probably would do most of them with the short boil and then the pressure canning. Just, again, it's a texture thing. So that is everything. That was a little bit long-winded, sorry about that, but that's everything that I went through in my pantry and things that I will and will not can again, or I will be mindful of the method and the produce that I use to preserve. So I'm glad you joined me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you again next time.